I came in, sat down, then he says, "You're going to go blind. Macular degeneration. Got no treatment."
Right.
What? I'm 25, almost 6 feet tall, and I'm degenerating already? Sir, what am I going to do with the rest of my life?
Well, good day and welcome to the Hat Rack. It's Dr. Bill McCauley. I'm the Associate Dean of Continuing Professional Development at the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry in London, Ontario. This is an odd day for me. It's kind of an odd day, an exciting day. It's an odd day because it's the first time we've recorded an episode of the Hat Rack without my partner in crime, Leslie McAdam, who has recently left us to go on a family sailing trip. She's taken her kids out of school and she is sailing through the world. So by the time this podcast is published, she'll probably be in the St. Lawrence River, or maybe in the eastern coast of the United States, or the Caribbean, or who knows, maybe even heading across the Atlantic Ocean. So we wish Leslie well. It's going to feel a little bit odd not having her by my side, but we'll persevere. The reason it's an exciting day is that I've got a guest with me here who is going to be giving us a little bit different perspective on life. We often talk on the Hat Rack about the importance of planning your CME or your CPD in a proactive way so that you can effectively make change in your practice. My guest is going to talk a little bit about how you navigate things when you're forced to change your practice in some capacity. So I'm really pleased to have with me Dr. Vladimir Yakovishin. And Dr. Yakovishin is a proud alumnus of the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Western Ontario, as it was called when he graduated, and has got a great and inspiring story to tell. So, Dr. Yakovishin, welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me.
So let's just find out a little bit about you. You are a graduate of Western, and I say Western because when you graduated, it wasn't Schulich; it was Western.
Correct.
And what year did you graduate?
1968.
All right, so 1968, and I can tell you, for someone who is X years old.
81.
81 years old. He is spry and talkative, and he'll be talking more than me on this podcast, I can guarantee you. So you graduated from medical school at Western in 1968, and while you were in medical school, something happened to you. Something started to change. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Of course. In my remarks, I would like to certainly encourage anyone that may eventually have to face similar obstacles, and my hope today is to excite you and inspire you. And I say, if I can do it, you can do it, likely even better. It was during medical school. Once you entered medical school, you thought the world was your cup of tea. And things went along very nicely through first, second, third year, and it was during the summer of my fourth year that our good family doctor, who became a mentor, not only was he my family physician, had me working as an extern in a local hospital west of here.
So an extern, that's sort of like an intern that's not graduated yet?
Correct.
Right, okay.
Correct. Terminology of that era.
Yeah.
But it was an experience. And it was during that time, serendipitous as it would be, we could scrub in, and the local surgeon was performing a procedure and handed me the scissors and said, "Cut the sutures." I thought, wow, I get to do something. And I'm trying to find the suture as he's holding it. It's hard to locate. And I said, what's the matter? Of course, psychologically, you're astute enough to know something's not right. Of course, he, in the operating room, pushes it off. "Oh, were you out last night? Too late, huh?" And it's set aside. Ironically, I'm invited to an ophthalmologist in the local area to spend the afternoon to see specialties. I thought, it's interesting. A young nurse from the hospital brings in her young son and says, "I think my young son is colorblind." The doctor says, "Well, of course." Reached over for the Yashahara color test that we looked at here in medical physiology first year. flipped them over, and I'm looking over the shoulder, and the young lad is able to see the appropriate numbers, which renders him red-green colorblind. After he leaves, I said to the ophthalmologist, I didn't see anything. He looked at me. Next patient.
So for both instances, both the surgeon and the ophthalmologist, they just kind of brushed it off as being something different.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Until I returned to school 4th year, and then we're required to do a presentation. And my classmates are horrified, as I am too. My reading speed in the group, and I thought, maybe it's the content. Here we go, rationalizing again. It's set aside. No one says anything, and I'm reluctant to say anything, thinking, well, maybe I need my correction adjusted. We get into February of the following year, graduation year, and we're learning fundoscopic exam. Didn't we all do it on one another? And my colleague looks into my eyes and says, you have like a peculiar looking eyes. So he called the instructor over, an ophthalmologist from St. Joe's. And he looked and he said, no, I think it's normal. I think it's just normal pigmentation in the macular area. Not to worry. Didn't worry. We get into March. The LMCCs are coming up. We're graduating this month, the end of May. And I turned to a colleague, started to read in front of him, and he said, oh, this is not good. Grabbed me by the arm, and off we go quickly. One bump up. If you're a student, you go to an intern or you go to a resident.
Sure.
And we do what doctors tend to do during any physical examination. Look at my nose, and can you see the fingers from all directions? But it's done at the board. We both, all three of us, look at one another. There's a huge central scotoma. Where did that come from?
So in your vision, you couldn't see, there was a whole patch of stuff centrally that you couldn't see.
No, didn't realize.
And this was discovered by the intern and or a colleague and an intern or resident at that time.
Resident at that time. The professors in those days, to get to see the professor, well, you'd had a wait list, even in that era. I'm sitting in that professor's private practice in the afternoon.
So this was a professor of ophthalmology?
Correct,
Yeah.
at Western.
Uh-huh.
Yes, well known.
Do you remember his name?
Yeah, of course,
What was
Dr.
it?
Charles Dyson.
Oh, Dr. Dyson. Yeah, okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. Did a thorough examination, and then we all sat back in his chair and said, Vladimir, you've got the strangest eyes I've ever seen. You've got pigmentations, you've got fishtail drusens there in the macular area, holding on with bated breath. You know, this is the professor. He's seen it. He's recognized something. He can fix it. I don't know what this is.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Correct.
Yeah.
What do we do now? We'll present you at grand rounds.
Okay.
Well, that's good.
So before we go on to that, I just want to clarify. You started having problems in earlier on in medical school. So you compensated for a couple of years. You were able to either rationalize or make it through all this time clearly with stuff that was going on in your vision for a couple of years before you were formed. Have I got that right?
I don't know if it's a couple of years, but certainly 6 months.
Okay. All right.
I don't know consciously because the process, which we'll speak about, when did it actually start?
So let's go back to grand rounds then. They thought they should present you at grand rounds. You were going to be a case at grand rounds.
Correct.
Okay. What happened there?
Everybody looked, including that said instructor, and he says, like doctors do amongst doctors and colleagues, well, I blew that.
Okay.
There is something there, but we don't know what it is. Everybody in the city had a look. He returned, and he said, you know what? I said, what? What's the diagnosis? You know,
Yeah. What
bated
is it?
breath. We don't know.
Okay. So you stumped everyone.
Stumped everybody. I said, boy, I did it. I stumped everybody. What are you going to do now? Well, I have to send you somewhere. I said, where? Eastern Seaboard, USA. I'll make an appointment. I said, better make one quick because I have to do the exams in May and graduate at the end of this month. Graduation was May 31st. We finally got you an appointment. Great. In the meantime, Dr. Balking would like to see you, and Dr. Ramsey Gunn would like to see you.
Okay, so Dr. Balking was the dean of the medical school at the time.
Correct.
Right. And Ramsey Gunton?
He was chief and professor of the Department of Internal Medicine. So I had an internist and a professor of ophthalmology go over me. Both shook their heads. We don't know what this is. Finally, the appointment is booked, and it's in the States. Even in that area, medical students were not known to have deep pockets. If they were deep, there were holes and lint in there, and my bank account was on life support even in that time. I came to the dean's office, and I thought, uh-oh, here's the dread and the fear, and your self-esteem is sinking rapidly. And I thought, uh-oh.
So what were you thinking? What were you afraid of in going to see the dean? What did you think he was going to do?
Give me my pink slip and say, there's the front door. We don't want anybody in this school that's got a problem. We don't even know what it is.
You
but
thought
if it's eyesight, maybe you're finished and you should be looking at something else.
Right.
Rejection.
So you thought he was going to tell you you're done.
Correct.
Okay. So you got sweaty palms and you turned the doorknob?
Absolutely.
What happened?
I came in, sat down, and Dr. Balkin, God bless him, calm, kind, generous, don't worry, empathetic, we'll look after you. Really? No. You go to Baltimore like Dr. Dyson has instructed. I don't know if I was able to articulate, but he reached into the drawer, it still brings emotions to me, and pulled out plane tickets, a check, go, you have a reservation.
So they paid for your whole trip to Johns Hopkins.
Correct.
Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore.
Correct. Food, lodging, everything.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. That's why my devotion and affection for Western and for our medical school.
That's
and,
impressive.
Collegiality of medicine.
So did you feel at that time that even though you were a medical student, you were being treated like a colleague?
Yes.
Yeah.
Unbeknownst to me,
Yeah.
I was already in the fold of a colleague because professors, not too much later, upon my return, said, we have to look after our own. Right. I thought, oh, that's beautiful. I go to Johns Hopkins, finally see the professor there, well-known in his field, did a thorough exam. In fact, another colleague came in because I'm a young doctor from Canada. They both had a look. I don't think I know what this is, but I have a hunch.
Okay. They weren't entirely sure.
Correct.
Okay.
Except this doctor said, I believe what you have, and out comes the Latin. I didn't study Latin. Fundi flavi maculata.
Fundi flavi maculata.
And he said, flect retina syndrome.
Had you ever heard of that?
Never heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
A variation of Stargardt's disease. No bells go off. Then he mentioned macular degeneration. Macular degeneration.
That you had heard of.
That I had heard of from Dr. Dyson's lectures.
Okay.
And then the insult to your self-esteem. What? I'm 25, almost 6 feet tall, and I'm degenerating already? I'm turning to protoplasm on his floor in a puddle. Then he says, you're going to go blind. What? Not total. You'll always have peripheral.
Right.
But you'll lose your central sight if I'm correct.
Right.
If I'm correct. Got no treatment.
Right.
Interview is over with, and we're reading the room, and I'm sweaty palms on the doorknob. Sir, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Become a psychiatrist.
That's what he said. So he planted the seed.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So do you remember how you felt during that appointment? I mean, that must have been one of the most emotionally charged moments of your life.
Absolutely.
Can you describe that to me?
It was disbelief. It was shock. It was anger. Almost rage at, you mean I came all this distance and you gave me this diagnosis? I expected. There's the unrealistic expectation that you, the consultant, you're going to fix it.
Right.
How dare this is going to happen to me? So bear in mind, when we're doctors seeing patients in whoever you are, family doctor, consultant, look out. Patients are projecting all of their wishes, desires, They're putting you on a pedestal, as I did.
You were no different. You
No
thought,
different.
you're the specialist, you're the most renowned retina person in the world, probably, and you're going to give me a diagnosis, and you're going to treat me, and you're going to fix me, and I'm going to go back to my life.
Absolutely right.
Didn't happen.
Absolutely didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, what am I going to do? That's another 4, 5 years of post-grad work.
Yeah. And you were by yourself at that interview, right?
Correct.
You had no one with you, no support person,
Nobody.
just you.
No family, no colleague, moi.
Okay. All right.
That's it.
So on the doorknob comment, he says, go into psychiatry.
Correct.
Okay.
Psychiatry. I don't think we have as much acceptability now as we did then. I thought, are you sure? What are the possibilities? Well, you could do medical administration. You could do public health. No, I love people.
Right.
Long ago as a little kid, I heard, we like to talk to you. You're easy to talk to. That you put away. You may have other skills that you're conscious of or unconscious of. That's put away as part of your armamentarium. I think, well, you'll tap into that. On the flight home, I still remember looking out the window, digesting all that was given to me, and anger towards that doctor, which took a time to work through. And I have to give him credit because I do return.
You returned to Baltimore?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm kind of curious, before we move on, what had you been considering as a career path prior to this devastating news? What was your dream?
If there was a dream, it was wide open and hadn't been consolidated. And again, the importance of early life role models. A graduate of Western, my family doctor, my mentor, he arranged for that externship, a colleague, and we kept in touch later to become a friend. I thought, well, maybe general practice would be interesting. I could come back as the town hero.
Had you considered psychiatry before he had made that comment?
No.
No. So that wasn't on your radar screen as something that you might pursue?
Not very conscious of it. No, it wasn't a strong consideration.
So you've got a whole mix of emotions. You're bitter towards him on one hand, grateful towards him on the other, in terms of coming up with an alternative suggestion for you.
Correct.
Wow.
Correct.
Okay. So what happened then when you got in the days, weeks, and months to follow after you got back to London?
Thinking it through, my internship is to start, if I can name the local hospital, St. Joseph's Hospital at that time. But before I entered, I came to see the professor of psychiatry right here in this school down the other hallway. And yes, of course, we all know about you. Small school, it all got around. I said, that's what was suggested to me. Would you take me? Again, I'm feeling worthless.
Right.
Why would you want me? Oh, no, you're one of our own. Sure, if you want it, absolutely. Really?
So
You'll give me a residency?
This was during your internship year you were having this discussion?
No, before internship, before interning was starting in July, I took an extra week before I commenced, and I thought I better do some homework and get some material together. I better not burn my bridges a year later. Somebody might take those slots. I better run to the professor quick and entertain that one before I approach the other and get a taste of it. And in that area, he gave me good advice. He said, listen, if you don't pursue it, get your license. At least you'll have your license to practice, whatever you decide, if you decide not to go into postgrad. I said, wonderful. Then I walk into St. Joe's. I've got that in my hip pocket, so I can at least fall back on if that's necessary. But I'm feeling, and if that's my decision, and I'm feeling worthless. Oh my God, here we go. I went through this here. Now I'm walking into St. Joseph's. My posting is psychiatry. I arrive.
That's your very first rotation of psychiatry?
Correct.
Yeah.
And I meet the professor who's greeting Dr. Tillman.
Dr. Tillman, okay.
Dr. Tillman. And he meets with me and says, well, nice to join, and you're going to be one of our residents. And I said, sir, are you aware that I'm going blind? Yes. We all have our strengths and weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
He looks at it as a strength, and there are other potentials there that I'm not aware of. I looking upon myself as weak because I can't see. Thrilling.
That must have been uplifting for you.
Very.
Right.
self-esteem, protoplasm is now rising.
That puddle of protoplasm on the floor is now reshaping like a phoenix rising from the ashes.
Yes, absolutely. Well put. And your confidence starts to build. And he referred to everyone who was a junior intern, a resident. And my goodness, I really got promoted before I even started. And I enjoyed it. Then I move on to the next 6 months.
So you still had some central vision at that point?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Acuity, to the best of recollection, maybe 2040, 2050. Right. So I had a long way to go yet.
Okay. So you made the decision that given the fact that despite your love for both internal medicine and psychiatry, given the fact your disease was likely to be progressive, that's kind of the thing that pushed you more into psychiatry, knowing that it would be a little bit easier for you in the long term.
Yes.
And so you entered a residency in psychiatry and haven't looked back.
Wonderful. I enjoyed it, but then comes you have to study for exams.
Right.
And eyesight, I keep returning annually to Dr. Dyson, and the painful is you look up at the Snellen chart, another line disappears, another line disappears. The big E had gone, so it's
right. So
how many
it's finger
fingers?
Counting, yeah.
It's finger counting at our distance. How am I going to read the books? And what
to
book?
study for your certifying examination.
Correct.
Yeah.
I thought, oh my goodness. This is 1973. Residency is being completed, but you're coming up to the Royal College exams. They're formidable.
Right.
Posted at CPRI, which may not necessarily be there, but the professor in those days said, well, that's a good place, nice grounds, child and adolescent psychiatry. You can study, do your work. And again, the doctors there, again, were very, very supportive. Dr. Ben Goldberg, and they looked upon me as a colleague. Do your job, and you're doing it, not a problem. I get volunteers. And who's one of the volunteers that is willing to read, along with others in the community and in the hospital itself, the dean's wife.
So these are volunteers who have offered to help you by reading textbooks to you? Is that what they're doing?
I put my money on one book. It was the comprehensive textbook of psychiatry, about 1,900 pages. And they would sit for an hour reading this technical material, and then they'd get tired. So I'd bring in another one, maybe 2 a day. 9 months later, we got through the whole book. The portable tape recorder had been commercially available. I purchased one, still have it, a museum piece now, on cassettes. I recorded, not that book, I only audited and listened, but fascinating in clinical medicine and residency, the collegiality, the experience of what you experience in a rotation going through the different hospital locations. It's there.
Right. So you created the original audiobook.
Yes.
With
yes.
multiple narrators.
Correct.
1,900 pages, multiple narrators, and then you would just re-listen to that? That's how you would study?
Fortunately, the synopsis of that book came out.
Okay.
And I could put it on 30 cassettes.
30 cassettes.
And at this time of year, in preparation for the Royal College exams, written in September, I believe, I'm walking around the campus anywhere with the earbud in my, carrying this tape recorder, listening to the synopsis over and over. I still have the cassettes.
Okay. And so so you then write and are you able to write at this point?
No.
No. Okay.
Another interesting collegial, the importance, the dean's wife said, well, how are you going to read the multiple choice?
Mm-hmm.
The written essay, I could hire the secretary to dictate, which I did. But she says, no, the technical material, multiple choice, how are you going to retain in your memory, is it A, B, C, or D, or is it statement A and all the alternatives? She says, our son is a local surgeon, retired, but that time he was a student. Maybe the two of you should rehearse, get the old papers, which we did.
So you're obviously successful at your exams on the first go-around?
Yes.
Yeah. And then came on staff at St. Joe's.
Yes. And I admit, don't want people to think, oh, yeah, so it was easy. He experienced success. He had a little glitch. No, I experienced failure, too. Went to the orals. I imploded.
Mm.
Had to come back and do it again.
So then you had a long career. You worked until 2002, I think I learned this morning. So,
Yes.
So that's at least sort of 30 years in practice, 40 years from the time you started studying medicine,
Yes.
right? Longer. Tell us a little bit about what were some of the proud moments of your career?
First one, I went back to close the loop on that doctor in Baltimore. Dr. Dyson said, go back and see him. He'd love to see you because he does speak about this learned doctor in Canada. So I bought my own ticket, went back, saw him, couldn't believe it. My perception of him then was not the way it was when success. And he was elated. Mm-hmm. And I thought, my goodness, how that rapport, how that changed in your perception. He was pleased. You did what I told you to do. You have to meet with my wife. I said, really? We have to do the pediatric ophthalmological genetic aspect of it. She's a pediatric geneticist. So I was grateful to Dr. Dyson. Later again, I get a phone call in my office. The building still exists across the street. From Baltimore, a young intern. Introduces himself on the phone and said, I'd like to meet with you. Why? I have the same condition as you. For the first time, I see another colleague, and I'm starting to give back.
So how have you used this experience going on to help other colleagues or to be a mentor? You've already talked a little bit about some things that you've had the opportunity to do. Is there anything else?
One of the central, and I stated, if I can do it, you can do it. But in the patient practice, people would come to me. I used to wear lenses like I am now, because with degeneration, you get photosensitivity. And the patients would come to you sometimes with, again, part of their emotionality, with their knowing they were coming to see a psychiatrist, and would look at me and said, well, who do you think you are? How can you ever understand my problem? You're this doctor and you had it easy in life. I said, no, I went blind. And they would be stunned. And what? And I would say, yeah, I had to overcome something.
So you used it. You used that experience clinically.
Yes.
As an example. I see. Well, I can attest to that because I was a medical student with you in 1985, and I think I was working with you for 2 or 3 days before I knew you were blind. Because you still look people in the eye, you know where they are. You lost your central vision, but you certainly don't project it. So I can see how that would happen. What about other colleagues or physicians who have had to make changes to their practice because of an unexpected event in their life? Have you had the opportunity to share your experiences with them?
You couldn't keep me quiet. If they wanted to hear it, I certainly told them in either thumbnail sketch, or they would come up to me and say, well, we have a respect for you.
So this podcast, as you know, is called The Hat Rack, and it's called The Hat Rack because we want to leave people with something they can hang their hat on. Do you have a couple of pieces of advice that you would offer to physicians or any healthcare practitioners in practice that may unexpectedly come up against an obstacle in life that causes them to have to change their career path? What advice would you give them?
Don't keep it to yourself.
Okay.
Share it. Share it with your best friend, your wife. Share it to your peers, to your superiors. Don't keep it to yourself. Even if you don't have an answer, and an answer may not be forthcoming, going back to a diagnosis, it may not be there, you may not be aware of, but don't try to carry it yourself.
Well, Dr. Yakovishin, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure and an inspiration having you here beside me, and I think that you have helped countless students in the past as they've come through and learned about psychiatry, and learned about it from someone who has overcome some obstacles themselves. So thank you for coming and for sharing your story with us.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and if need be, I'm available to listen or to tell you chapter 2.
Great. Well, that was a fascinating story from Dr. Yakovishin. I think that what I would take home from that, Dr. Yakovishin says, don't keep it to yourself. I was focused on the number of people that were, I think in his mind, surprisingly supportive of him when he felt worthless because he was developing a disability. His self-esteem was at its lowest. The number of people that rose to the challenge and supported him, the importance of collegiality, the importance of mentorship, the importance of looking after each other, those are all important features of his success. And we've talked often about, on this podcast, the importance of peer-to-peer interactions and how collegial isolation can get you into difficulty. Well, here's a great example of how collegial proximity, not isolation, but working with colleagues and trusting colleagues and having the support of your colleagues can have some success. So I think that's the take-home message, and thanks again to Dr. Yakovishin for sharing the story with us.
You've been listening to The Hat Rack, hosted by Dr. Bill McCulley and Leslie McAdam from Continuing Professional Development at the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry at Western University in London, Ontario, Canada. Technical assistance for The Hat Rack is provided by Patrick Barfoot, Technology Support Specialist at Schulich. Original music was composed by Cameron Beresnick. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions for future topics or guests. We can be contacted by email at thehatrack, that's all one word, thehatrack @uwo.ca. Additional episode information can be found online at www.schulich.uwo.ca/CPD. For The Hat Rack, I'm Stephanie Giberson-Kirby, Faculty Development Specialist at the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry, leaving you with something to hang your hat on.